Question 2. What if we are too focused on changing child behavior? Because just as you or I might be on autopilot driving to work one morning and don't even remember the commute, or our temper flares when our partner is too sarcastic, or we are caught off guard and gasp and cry when we see a horrific scene on the news, behavior is not as easily under control as we might like to think. Behavior is instinctual. We all know that fight, flight, and freeze responses are purely reactive emotional actions which take no thought. We can call them instincts because we see these survival behaviors among animals in the wild. Our own family cats and dogs easily display these instincts when they're outdoors with us, or in a new situation or threatening incidents, unless they are very well trained and are attached to us. With our own children, we haven't taught our kids these behaviors. In fact, we can be very alarmed when we see fight, flight, or freeze from our own children. But to see these behaviors as instincts is truly a shift away from our behaviors thinking that we have control through rewards and consequences to such an extent that we can fully manage behavior. Because the teacher burnout that I see is the result of feeling so responsible to use all the charts, points, stickers, positive comments, or no tolerance policies when it doesn't give lasting results. But consider if we are feeling responsible to make it work when it doesn't work, then we must try something quite different. Gordon Neufeld will tell us whatever we cannot change should change us. So I'm going to take the next 3 slides to expand our view of behavior as instinctual through the relational and developmental lens. Remember, instincts are not taught. Even very young children will use fight, flight, or freeze reactions when we play monster with them, chase them around the house till they scream, hide, or retaliate. You can actually see their innate alarm system flood their body with excitement, impairing their coordination and decision making as they dart away, run for cover, or perhaps roll over and start kicking wildly. In this kind of play I'm describing, the adult intentionally moves more slowly than usual, creeping toward the child with exaggerated monster motions, and even speaking slowly, "I'm gonna get you." If we dial up our speed and say, "I'm gonna get you," we get a highly triggered effect and we risk children running into walls or scrambling on the slippery floor or kicking at us, maybe kicking us in the face perhaps, because their brain has no access to decision making or choice. High emotions create very quick reactions, taking no forethought, no planning, and no choice. This is true of children in social situations because of the quick speed of social interactions, especially if there are several children involved. Our instincts are not simply behavior. They are core attachment mechanisms, so they are dynamics of relationships and dynamics of development. This is why our walking wounded will respond well to this teacher, but not to that teacher based on the quality of the adult-child relationship. And they will function very well in this setting, designed to match the developmental needs of this child, but not in that setting, which is not sensitive to child emotional development. It's not the effectiveness of consequences or even skills or even learning that we should depend upon to change behavior. We need to focus more on emotions, feelings, and attitudes. Fight, flight, and freeze are instincts with which we have become most familiar, but these words don't have much relational or developmental wisdom to them. For example, the word fight. It might be used reasonably well when we describe children or youth in altercations with each other. But can we say that infants fight or elders fight? Not really. Yet the Neufeld attachment concept of counterwill can capture the essence of the struggle. When infants rail against feeling cold, wet, they don't want to get dressed or be dressed, or they feel disconnected from mom. Young children will resist cleaning up a fun activity or resist falling asleep. Also, sometimes when teens give attitude or argue with us, it's because their counter will has been triggered. They feel coerced or even afraid to accept more responsibility in this world. Adult counter will gives us the judgment to decide when it's time to rally to debate social injustices. This is the expression of counter will across a range of developmental ages. If we use the word counter will, we can more fully appreciate the instinct to resist coercion, since everyone from infants to elders have a will of their own. This is a wonderful instinct. We each exercise our will within relationships for reasons that will be developmental in nature. However, if we get stuck in counter will, then our emotions, feelings, and attitudes are stuck in saying no, resisting, rejecting, being rigid, and not adapting to changes or new learning. The concept of counter will gives us a relational developmental view of the instinct to fight. But what about flight? No developmental wisdom in this word, unless it makes sense to say infants flee and elders flee. Yet the newfound concept home base captures the idea of returning to the familiar for safety, returning to our secure relational base, and craving the connections which give us feelings of belonging, loyalty, and significance. For example, infants will crawl away from their parents only as far as they can tolerate, without feeling too emotionally disconnected. Then they're triggered to return to their parent and get a hug. Most of us yearn to return to the family home for holidays. And at school, children need friendships and a positive relationship with a teacher, but also they need daily schedules to feel the home base that a classroom can provide. Home base means more than flight, running, or bolting, because there are psychological ways to seek home base, like hiding or turtling to shut out the unfamiliar. And even self-stim behaviors from our younger or developmentally disabled children. In these cases, children are self-soothing in a desperate attempt to feel at home or make a calming space or fantasize about home. Being stuck seeking home base is to feel lost, lonely, and suffer separation anxiety. Okay, next on this list is freeze. A freeze response can be very deceptive because freezing can make a child appear on the outside as calm, disengaged, or manipulative. Yet freezing needs to be understood from the inside as anxiety with worried self-talk that ruminates, running circles inside the brain, and prevents us taking any action. This is better described as shyness. We can better relate to this experience when we reflect on our own feelings of terror or embarrassment that make us freeze. Someone looking at us may not read our reaction as terror or embarrassment, but we are so full of these emotions that we are frozen. If we can appreciate that there is safety in shyness for young children, then we can better understand how the village of attachment safeguards children from being influenced by outsiders or strangers. Shyness is therefore natural and necessary for emotional development. Young children should not be expected to listen to, follow, or interact with anyone outside the family or anyone the family doesn't know well. This is the safety provided by shyness. We notice that all kids reacting too often with shyness will hide their emotions. These children have a very flat emotionality to them. They are afraid to speak. They are voiceless and seem to have no opinions. Emotional maturity creates a person who is less shy than before. Yet we will always experience our shyness again in brand new situations or with a new group of people in challenging situations. At least this is normal, because it's smart to listen more than talk in new situations. Yet we are never shy when we are with our people. Isn't that interesting that even the shyest among us are not shy when we are among our closest relationships? But being stuck in shyness can be problematic. For example, selective mutism is debilitating. Or consider how teens and adults limit their achievement and career aspirations if they are too shy. Young children are very close to their instincts, because they don't have enough life experience to have a generous repertoire of ways to behave, especially in social settings. They can easily be stuck in the use of counter will, home base, and shyness. We must be aware that being stuck actually interferes with relationships and stalls emotional development. Children who are stuck in these instincts are trying to cope, and they will only be successful in activating adults to support them to get unstuck if adults understand behavior better and have the insight to generate ideas using relational and developmental thinking. So I want to repeat that we have been working with a very limited understanding of behavior because behavior is often instinctual. So I wonder if you have considered three more instincts. And these ones are appease, approach, and avoid. Before attempting to talk about appease, approach, and avoid instincts, it's important to review hierarchy as a basic tenet of attachment theory. Attachment relationships are naturally hierarchical, so one person can be the caregiver and the other person is the care receiver. The caregiving and receiving hierarchy is necessarily flexible. So, for example, our spouse can take care of us when we are sick, and we then take care of them when they are sick. One of us in a married couple usually takes the lead when it comes to decisions in categories of like household appliances, car maintenance, childcare, family nutrition, or whatever. One parent is usually more knowledgeable or more invested in those aspects of family life. Children and youth are meant to be under adult care, but of course, there are very good times for children to feel responsible for their parents in little ways, like making breakfast for mom on Mother's Day or schooling dad in video games. But attachment hierarchy is natural because we are at different points in our emotional development. And of course, the more life experience we have, the wider perspective we draw our judgment from to be flexible, empathic, and generous, which are hallmarks of responsible, caring adults. But at times, don't you feel like you're walking on eggshells around certain kids? They are not able to receive care in the spirit that we are caregiving. This is the experience of appeasing when we are caught up in the alpha complex. Appeasing can be confusing to explain because I think this word describes a one-sided view of the experience of adults in relationship to alpha kids who are caught up in the alpha complex with us. Alpha kids try to take on the role of adults, to order adults around, to tell adults what to do. When we do not get the hierarchy set right between adult and child, adults must find their own caring alpha to be fully functioning as the responsible and responsive and dependable leader for a child. Adults need to be the alpha presence in a child's life. Alpha kids can get very picky with food. They're picky eaters. They crave sugary and salty foods. And they might be eating poor diets generally because they don't have the knowledge of nutrition that adults have, and they won't listen to adults. Bedtimes can also be a problem. They can be a battle because kids won't follow routines at home. Or perhaps we can't get them to do chores. They won't do chores at home. Alpha adults prevent poor diets and sleeping issues in childhood by using relational developmental approaches to organize children's emotions, feelings, and attitudes when taking charge to reset the hierarchy. In fact, the alpha complex is maintained by adults who resort to appeasing when kids are tantruming or trying to use force. They're sulking, they're arguing until they get what they want. When kids are stuck in immature alpha, they believe they know more than everyone else. They always need to be first or best. They will be aggressive. They will bully, confront, trump, interrupt, and need to have the last word. Children stuck in alpha ways of behaving will be very difficult for teachers to manage and are often very difficult at home as well. When home and school work together to understand the alpha complex, great changes can happen. It is also instinctual to attempt to approach and connect with another person. The concept dependence gives a good understanding of this dynamic, to want to give our safety over to another person. This is an appeal to depend on someone who will definitely or possibly respond with understanding. So this looks like deferring or looking up to for guidance or judgment or explanation. The will to follow and listen to. And this is a good thing, but not when we compulsively look for protection instead of solving our own problems or avoid learning new skills. We need to be more independent. When children are stuck in this instinct, they can be clingy, anxious, lack resourcefulness. They're unable to initiate friendships, and so there is a lack of resilience generally. The last instinct to discuss is avoiding, better explained by the attachment label detach, because it helps us see that many children are so avoidant of relationships that they are actually working to disconnect and back out of relationships. Detaching is withdrawing from social contact. We will separate ourselves from others physically or in the psychological sense by camouflaging emotions or hardening our feelings, refusing to participate, and not be able to partner or work in groups. This is more than shyness. Detaching is a reaction to feeling very uncomfortable having to deal with the emotional content of relationships, especially if the child has been subjected to experiences of guilt and shame. Children who hear or feel they are not good enough, not skilled enough, not correct enough, or not likable enough will lose the attitude to care because of feelings of anger, guilt, and shame. Children left to manage their own anger, guilt, and shame are at high risk for aggression and self-harm as they struggle toward adulthood. Anger, guilt, and shame introduce high risk indeed for mental health issues. We all need to know that core attachment instincts like these 6, any of which become habitual and stuck, will not ease up and certainly won't disappear unless they aren't needed anymore. So I'm suggesting that a good stopgap measure is to remove children from situations where they are stuck in these reactions, at least until they can adopt other ways to cope, or they have established at least 1 or 2 friendships. If we can be aware of all 6 core instincts, then we can see the patterns kids present to us as we can, number 1, remove kids from those situations proving to be the most problematic by providing alternative activities, or number 2, provide more supervision for those kids who are closest to their instincts, or number 3, generate interventions to enhance relationships and support emotional coping. So to review, when children and teens appear to be stuck in any of these 6 instincts, our best practice is to activate our own mature alpha as the leader of children and take charge in relational developmental ways. How to do this with specific stuck behaviors in mind is a larger discussion, but a very important discussion about interventions in school settings. This is a great topic for a teacher workshop format because each school culture and resources at hand are specific to each school. Interventions become formative work that not only accesses untapped resources in the school, but also generates new ways for school staff members to work together in supporting the biggest challenges students hand us. For example, interventions for some of these, like going at counterwill, for example, going at counterwill directly will exacerbate this instinct, so use workarounds. Demanding a child not resort to home base makes them more fearful and less cooperative. Challenging shyness with projects including public speaking needs to be done by the child using goal setting. Best practice with the alpha complex is to fully understand the value of finding our own mature alpha to be in charge in supportive yet challenging ways, so kids with strong personalities will want to learn from us. Also, if we invite and pull close to us those children who are overly dependent, it is amazing to see their independence emerge. And finally, investigate the life circumstances of children who detach, because they're experiencing wounding relationships which we are overlooking. Talking about how to deal with triggered instincts like these 6 is definitely a tease at this point, because there is huge work to creating banks of relational developmental interventions defining this approach. But let's not be intimidated, because we can begin in small ways, setting patterns in classroom relationships by what we say and how we react. This is not a program, this is an approach. To sum up this view of behavior, I want to point out that the most immature in any cohort will be resorting to instinctive reactions more than others. The 6 instincts, fight, flight, freeze, appease, approach, or avoid, are useful and necessary to negotiate social contexts that a child doesn't quite fit into yet. But we need a better understanding of these basic instincts. I think the 6 labels we have discussed broaden our view on behavior and actually normalizes even severe behavior in ways that behaviorist thinking cannot. However, interventions for problem behavior, which can truly enhance relationships and support emotional development, are still hidden from view unless we use a relational developmental lens and introduce labels of the core attachment instincts, which are counter will, home base, shyness, alpha, dependence, and detaching. So this is the bigger picture of how children should change schools just as much as how schools will change children. A relational developmental framework built with applied attachment thinking has the potential to construct new pedagogy full of insightful professional practices for the walking wounded and the everyday patterns in classrooms to personalize those practices to the behavior challenges from individual students. What can be truly amazing about shedding our behaviorist thinking is the potential change in school culture, because the wisdom of teachers and the wisdom of parents has always been our strength. But we need to create ideas using a relational developmental frame. So those can be the new patterns and practices to use with children that are at mental health risk. We cannot just try anything with our walking wounded. We have to use a framework to do fruitful work, to enhance relationships and support development. Not only will we have difficult time trying to manage instinctual behaviors, we need to consider that behavior is resistant to control in other ways. Behavior is political. It's all about boundaries, entitlement, fairness, just like the conflicts we observe between the countries in this world, in fact. Conceptualized this way, we can see that children actually don't intend to test our boundaries. They are unaware of our boundaries, or our boundaries are meaningless to them because they cannot appreciate the perspective of the school or of the whole classroom group. I like to state that kids set their own boundaries. They aren't really trying to test ours. If we see it this way, we have a different reaction. This child is acting more like a person from a foreign culture. In other words, kids bring their own sense of boundaries, entitlement, and fairness based on past experiences or stuck attitudes and expectations. Thinking of a child with problem behaviors as a foreigner will be the least jarring to their sense of self, because we don't have to use consequences or discipline, but instead we're going to use ongoing orientation to how we do things in this room, establishing leadership from the teacher. The teacher is here to show and tell the hows and whys of school. Useful to think about the ongoing effectiveness of emotional orientation. This is really useful because we don't want to resort to consequences and discipline unless we absolutely have to. We can tell children, the assembly will feel crowded, noisy, confusing, but your job is to sit, staying still on your spot with your classmates, or hold my hand if you want to. So we're orienting them emotionally to what's going to happen in there and how they could react. You might have to wait for a long time, we might say, for your turn on hot lunch day, but be ready to use your patience. Or you might not get the color that you pick, your first pick, so be ready with a second choice or third choice. Our youth also need to know the role of the principal is to make sure the school is safe. So it can seem as if she doesn't care about your feelings, but I'll be there too, and we can present your side together. So in this way, we're orienting kids all the time for what emotionally they might experience or what procedures they might have to be thinking about. Behavior is not only political, it's emotional, and so it's not easily understood. Behavior is not only political, it is emotional and so is not easily understood. Even adults have great difficulty with emotional self-regulation because of emotions that can emerge from the deepest parts of the brain without much warning. Our behavior can be confusing even to ourselves because there is emotional content we're not thinking about. For example, we can be challenged by multiple frustrations throughout our day, and when we finally begin to relax, a foul temper comes out. Once adults reflect on the difficult day, there can be an explanation for the flaring temper, but this kind of reflective thinking takes considerable time to develop as emotional maturity. Even a short statement like, "Leave me alone," can take considerable time for a young child to formulate. The swift hit will occur first. And think of an older child or youth that is shy. There might not be much language at all, but there will be history to any altercation, innuendo in numerous encounters, maybe rumors, threatening body language, most definitely followed by impulsive acts, instead of speaking out and speaking their mind. In this photo, you can see that one boy is experiencing this as more of a game. He is totally invested in the action on screen. We can guess who might be feeling victimized by either the action on screen or the loud emotions. The blonde boy is probably unaware of any emotional reactions around him and equally unaware of the intensity of others' feelings as the result of his behavior. So later, he will have no idea why his friend says that he is mean or too loud or not playing fair. Behaviors can be honest or deceptive. We all learn that we can hide emotions from others and even be intentionally dishonest by expressing feelings to appease others. Children learn very quickly which emotions adults will not tolerate and are left to manage some strong emotions they don't know what to do with. This is one reason we can be surprised when the child who otherwise appears able to handle their emotions very well might be aggressive, and certainly explains why children with multiple frustrations will often be aggressive. There are no wrong emotions, but there certainly are difficult and inconvenient emotions. Yet, without all of our emotions, we cannot make sense of our whole self and cannot begin to do the difficult work of emotional regulation. The least mature children and youth we work with will need co-regulation much more than they need any expectations from us for self-regulation. So they need us to help regulate them. The zones of regulation lessons can get kids working along with us in acknowledging that emotion comes in varied intensities. But children will still need considerable co-regulation from adults to organize their feelings, because we seldom have one emotion at a time unless it's very strong. I do worry about giving children a lot of information about which emotions are acceptable, which I believe is the result of positive behavior intervention programs, unfortunately, because as our children get older, they can become increasingly socialized, and socialized is an easy word to dislike. We all have seen youth that are much too preoccupied with how they look to others from the outside and hide how they feel on the inside. So as long as we discuss how we all struggle with emotions and our emotional communication is always necessary and important to all of us in learning and life, we won't be repeating what many families experience, and that is that you cannot show anger, you cannot show frustration or hurt. So when we feel these emotions, we are on our own. This is a dangerous situation for all kids, and especially dangerous for youth. Okay, moving on. Behavior comes from multiple contexts of life events. We all live and develop in contexts of family, school, work, maybe extended family, soccer teams, dancing lessons, even daycare. And each one of these contexts impacts us. Just as one student can impact a whole classroom, we can see that our context impacts us and we impact the context. So there's a reciprocal impact that moves between context and person, but also there are impacts that move across contexts. So, for example, a child experiencing the satisfaction of athletic challenge and team connection, and they feel significant on the soccer team, can bring that positive impact into the classroom when this child is much more collaborative, much more of a team player in the school. And it can also lead to future positive expectations for joining other sports or being a really good group member in other ways. But on the negative side, a child who is stuck in instinctual behaviors at school will display some strong behaviors in other contexts, and the negative tone to their life will be exhausting, making their reactive behavior even more likely at unpredictable times. A classroom will always be a negotiated culture, meaning that everyone in the room has an impact on creating what it's like in that classroom. Fortunately, positive experiences will bring a positive slant to the class. But unfortunately, negative experiences that invade too many spheres of a child's life, whether in real time or even online, this is going to impact coping in a busy, demanding context like school. And the overall culture in the classroom or even in the school could suffer. We already use perspective taking in schools, and I think perspective taking is a really fruitful practice that we can develop as part of a relational developmental approach in schools. Perspective taking in schools might be confined right now to the he said, she said of settling arguments or behavior incidents. So, to create a relational culture, children need to hear the perspective of others, many others, when thinking about almost everything. Let's just remember that this can be done as part of the negotiated culture of a classroom when we ask philosophical questions like, what is kindness? Who am I? How can we get rid of bullying? And what is a friend? Those discussions can happen all the time with children in elementary classrooms. But with youth, perspective taking is so important as well. And it can be too intimidating in a classroom to pit one opinion against another, or have those kids that are very verbal and extroverted, arguing their point when we have students that are overly shy and won't enter into the conversation very easily. So what we need to do is use structure, like the structure of a debate, for example, or transitional stimulus, like a newspaper article that can get discussions going. Even with older kids, we can use children's literature that has a strong theme, perhaps an environmental theme, that can open up a discussion in a classroom. So those are just a couple of ideas, but perspective taking would be a really fruitful practice for us to adopt. Behavior might be immediately changed, but without long-lasting effects. Lasting behavior change is the result of two aspects of development. There is a breaking away from old habits and an opening up to new perspectives. So we can see that being stuck using instinctual behaviors prevents the breaking away of old habits, and so prevents emotional development. And also we can see that perspective taking is very important to open up new perspectives. Neither of this is possible unless children intend to cooperate with us. Therefore, we need them to be in a good relationship with us that is maintained by us in little ways every day, and so can be sustained, and we can access that relationship for good perspective taking. A good enough relationship activates emotional development in children because they are open to our interpretation of the world, and they're not relying on instinctual reactive thoughts and actions that keep them immature. So I believe the most valuable consistency that we talk about a lot comes from the dependable, responsive relationship provided by the teacher. We cannot rely on rules and expectations to be consistent enough because circumstances change. Children's needs and personalities require us to personalize, individualize, and bend the rules. The consistency that we all talk about, necessary for children to thrive, comes from us, from the relationship with us. When children know they can rely on the teacher to be fully present, to listen and accept what the child has to say, no matter what the child's emotional state, then and only then will the adult have the power to lead the child's emotions, to calm the child, and this is emotional co-regulation. Emotional co-regulation is necessary for a considerable and also unknown length of time before we get a child attempting self-regulation of their emotions. We want to work for long-lasting effects in behavior change and not just go for immediate change that doesn't rely on those two aspects of development, the breaking away of old habits and the opening up to new perspectives. So to sum up all these thoughts about behavior, behavior management and behavior change can be too elusive to be a fruitful focus in understanding or managing children because behavior is instinctual, political, emotional. It easily falls into honest or dishonest use. And behavior emerges from multiple contexts created by life experience. We can surely get tangled in codes of conduct, behavior strategies, trying to teach skills of self-control, or track behavior and compile behavior data in what we view to be positive ways when we're expecting children to change. However, if there is a generous relationship between teacher and student, the child is more likely to listen, follow, and respect the teacher's lead. Our tools need to be a consistently warm and responsive relationship with children and youth. Ongoing orientation, especially as it applies to the strong emotions we might predict from individual children, and the use of perspective taking for a negotiated culture among the group. Human development relies on relationship and belonging, especially with the most challenging children. The tools that we need to understand behavior are listed here to look for patterns of instinctual behavior to discuss at school-based team meetings. So we're trying to identify what behaviors that child is getting stuck with. We want to acknowledge the political and emotional nature of behavior for ongoing perspective taking, so that we're having lots of class discussions about what the class thinks about this or that. What are their thoughts that compare with the other kids in the class, and how do we kind of negotiate this context of what we believe in this classroom. We also want to discuss with families the multiple contexts of a student's life, or access counseling to do this for problem solving, because it's those children that are having the most severe behavior in school that are having difficulty in other contexts as well, or maybe there are not enough contexts for them. Maybe their world is too small and they're really frustrated because they don't have opportunities to use their good thinking or their energy in some challenging ways. And then also, we want to realize that behavior can be difficult to change unless relationships improve. So always working on that relationship is really going to pay off.